my average interviews for this were like 12 hours for like one person. So
Remind me to always say no if you ask for anything.
yeah, my editors all hate me.
Brad, I wanted to start with you. Famous Last Words is a very interesting and unique concept, but it's based on a Danish format where the subjects share their final message for the world, knowing that it won't air until after their death. How do you approach building your interviews in a way that feels honest and vulnerable and true to the person that is on the other side of that conversation while also making it a compelling one for the audience?
Um, well, I mean, the biggest thing obviously is to get the right guest who's really up for that particular adventure, which is talking about their own death in an honest and fearless way. So if you have the right subject, then it gets much easier. And then on top of that, I like to do a lot of preparation. So I spend weeks researching them and studying them and really knowing more about them than they know about themselves, just so that I can guide them into areas that I think maybe are revelatory about who they were. And also, if they say something that I think is sort of a thread to pull, then I can sort of connect it to something else. So it's really about knowing them really well and them being game for it, and then creating a very, very safe space for them where they know they can say anything, and they won't be judged. There's nothing to worry about.
It is an interesting idea to approach somebody about potentially doing, an interview that will air after their death. How do you go about finding those subjects and like approaching that initial conversation?
Well, what I always say is that, the show is the conversation that we have has to be fearless, right? So it really has to say there's no consequences of this. You can just really be yourself. And so the approach has to be fearless as well. We can't worry about someone taking it the wrong way. And a lot of people say no, right? So you just don't worry about that. And I never look at no as no forever. It means they're not ready to have this conversation. And so the approach is usually not, will you come to the show? It's, can you talk to me privately and I can explain to you what this is about and what we're trying to do? And usually people are willing to sit down and talk to me about it. They're already mostly there, and then we can get them there. So I rarely ask people, or we rarely ask people, hey, do you want to do this?
Alexandria, Sean Combs' Reckoning is not the first project you've done about somebody that's very well known, but this is a very heavily publicized case, and you are using a lot of archival footage. I'm curious how this did differ from other subjects you've explored in the past.
Well, I think, with documentary work, there's no one size fits all approach. Even within a film, every subject that you're sitting down with. This story, I was sort of shooting it as I was making Brittany Griner's story. So those are my two. I do sports to stay sane. um, and so it was a really, frenetic, crazy schedule. It took us 2 years to put it together, no sleep, because we were sort of trying to put together this series that looked historically at his life and his contributions and things, because I wanted to look at the timeline. I wanted to understand, how do you even get to a place where all of this chaos could ensue? But we were also still dealing with, what was happening in his life in real time. And so when I actually started the day that Cassie dropped her lawsuit. That's where I kind of got the idea. And then, I started shooting before there was even an indictment. And so we were sort of rolling, with the reality of what was going on, and all the way up until the bitter end. After the verdict, I interviewed. There's two jurors in the series that come in the fourth episode, and I sat down with one juror 24 hours after that the verdict was released. So it was like reacting like being in a newsroom, but having to put on the hat of a documentarian of like, okay, I'm not here to try to just get two lines out of you. I really want to understand and break down as much as I can about this story.
Kian, Love on the Spectrum gets such a honest and vulnerable portrait of these people's dating lives, and I think it's what viewers connect to the most about the show. But I'm curious how you balance that with also making sure that all of these participants feel safe to be that honest and raw about their dating experience on a TV show.
Hmm. Good question. Um, I'm not sure. I mean, I think, the way we approach our filming and, jumping into people's lives is very considered and very low impact and we're like a really small team. We talk to people a lot before we end up filming with them. Like before we um, even kind of get to the point of inviting someone to be part of the series, I'll go and visit them. I'll meet them in their home. I'll meet their families if that's who they live with. And I think it's just how we approach everything. It's just very much like we're kind of in this together. It's never kind of like we're this untouchable TV production that is going to sign them up to be part of this thing. I think we're always kind of collaborative in that way. I don't know if that answers the question, but does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. I you've all touched a little bit on this idea of building trust with your subjects or with, your interviews. And I'm curious if you can talk a bit about how you do that and just how that can differ, depending on who is sitting across from you.
Starting with me.
I've got it.
Interviews? Well, I mean, so our series is very different to, I guess, a lot of series in the unscripted space in that we only do one interview really with our cast right at the beginning. It's the only time we bring lights in to someone's house. Otherwise, we're just tiny team, no lights, just really shooting in a way that hopefully captures things in a very honest and truthful way, which is the most important thing to me and to us in making the show. So for that one interview, that's the one time that kind of really try and kind of, get people to open up and tell us about their hopes and dreams and what they're looking for and what I guess, what autism means to them, what their life's all about. It's, I mean, it is a dating show, but sometimes I say it's kind of like a character-led series disguised as a dating show in some ways. So that's really our only interview. And then the rest of it is just we're just filming. We're just, yeah, sure, we'll pull people aside occasionally during a date and say, how are you feeling? But apart from that, it's really just very observational and very verite based.
Um, for well, trust was a very big deal on this series. It took a lot of off the record conversations that they can turn to an on the record conversation. A lot of phone calls, a lot of just listening. I mean, most of the people that I interviewed for this, um, had spent so much of their life being outcast. They were after they sort of had a falling out with Sean. They were siloed, they were silenced, and they really felt like they were alone. And so I think that there was sort of this energy of like all of this news starting to come out that gave them a little bit of a, I think this recognition that like, wow, I'm not the only one, that went through that or experienced that. And so that was a part of, I think, that helped me. And then, in my conversations with everyone, I very much believe that, trauma is not necessarily story. And I think a lot of, other people talking about um, what was going on just wanted to focus on like the worst possible events and not build out anything else. And for me, context is everything. I wanted them to understand that, as a victim, let's understand what was great about him, what was great about this world, what did you want, what were you excited about, because that's really important to understand, the journey, or for people to be able to relate to that experience. It could be anyone's daughter, it could be anyone's sister or themselves, that could enter this world and sort of maybe blur the lines of boundaries and things like that. So we spent a lot of time talking about the good, and the bad. And I think that I think most people felt that that was freeing, in a way that it wasn't like black or white. It's like so much of the story is in the middle. And we were just talking before we came on about how long, you shoot. My interviews are also very long. Sometimes, well, my average interviews for this were like 12 hours. For like one person. So
Remind me to always say no if you ask for anything.
yeah, my editors all hate me. But yeah, the interviews were very long, but I did that so that we didn't have to I didn't want anyone to feel rushed. Sometimes I was talking to people that were living with trauma that for over a decade. So I'm not going to sit there and go, let's, you know, like spit it out. I wanted them to feel comfortable, and I wanted them to take the lead. I'm just there with the camera. So I think all of that kind of.
Brad, how long do the interviews usually take?
It really depends on the sort of sometimes the endurance of the guest. So the first one we shot went for 6, 7 hours is without a break. I mean, the person was just unstoppable. I got worn out before they did. And then other ones we've shot ones where, we will shoot an hour and a half one day and then come back the next day because there's no way. Even a break won't sort of do it. So the great thing is we keep them open ended. We say we're going to be here as long as we can be, as long as we need to be. If you need to take a break, if you need to take a nap, if you need to have a coffee or tea or vodka, whatever it is you need to have, then it's really the space is for them. And that's, fundamentally in terms of getting back to even the trust thing, it's to really let the subject know who you're talking to that you do care about them. You are here as a service to them to get their story out, to do what's best for them. And so I can tell when we're done, when we have what we need, and when there's not much more to say that's going to be helpful.
The episode that we're here to talk about today is, the conversation with Eric Dane. Can you tell me a little bit about preparing for that conversation and just how much you felt like you guided that conversation versus let him take it the direction that he wanted to go?
I mean, I think any good conversation is a dance, right? Nobody's leading. You're just sort of, playing with each other. And so for him, reached out and he agreed to have dinner with me, and we had dinner, and we really connected pretty deeply. We're the same age. So we've all a lot of the same ideas and references, and had a lot of the ideas about where we were in our lives until what happened to him, when his ALS diagnosis. So, for that, again, same thing, a lot of research, a lot of preparation, a lot of talking to him about what he really wanted to get out of it. And then we just sat down, and he was an incredible conversation subject because he was so honest and so willing to react to things, so willing to bring things to the conversation and never afraid of any question I would ask him. So, that one I found, and also, I don't know, I don't know what you guys, I find it so much easier to talk to someone who's taken their time. It's interviewing with someone with ADD is hard. It's a little like riding a tornado. It's a little hard. And so with someone like Eric, like he was forced to take his time, but he also was very thoughtful. So that the tone of that conversation really came from that dynamic.
Alexandria, you know, in addition to exploring this documentary with Sean Combs, you've also had other subjects like Chelsea Handler, Reggie Jackson. When you are handling a documentary about a famous subject and you're calling on other people to speak about this person, how do you explore the motives of the person sitting on the other side of that conversation?
Well, my job is not necessarily to filter or to, like, I want all of it. And so, with Sean, there's people that first of all, I wanted an interview with him. So in not having that interview, it was crucial to try to get as many people to give sort of like a varied, perspective on who he was. And was breaking down like just the basic forward facing version of Sean Combs, and then obviously all of these things that were going on behind closed doors. And so I find that the interviews that are sort of in the minority group, like for this story, like people that felt like he was perfect and like everyone else had, was the issue and the problem. Those were some of my favorite interviews, to be honest, because I felt like getting into their psyche was very interesting. And I really wanted to understand, like, how can you not see that maybe you were okay, but that there were people hurting, like here and here. And I think that creates like tension and really interesting, stories. There's a woman, an artist named Kalina Harper's in the last episode. And that was probably the most interesting interview because she was very, we had a lot of conversations on the phone prior to shooting, and she had, her POV, her perspective on Sean is like, I love the guy and he did a lot for me. And so she kind of came in with this perspective. And that's not my place is not to say, no, let me get you to talk, let me get you to go somewhere else. But in the interview, actually it was the second round of 12-hour day. um, we were talking and then we just started, because she's involved. That's who he's calling on the phone. Like when he was being taped, he was calling her like days before he gets arrested to try to go out in public and say that he was a good guy. And so we had the footage of him making those phone calls. And so I wanted to get her perspective on like, well, she's like, well, I have the text here. And so I'm looking at the text. And in that conversation, long story short, I think she realized that she had been manipulated. And I didn't say anything. We just sat there and you could just see it on her face. And I have a brilliant editor who cut that scene, and we were like, let's just sit with her realizing in real time on camera that maybe the relationship wasn't everything she expected it or thought that it was.
Um,
Hence, the 12-hour interviews are
yeah,
worth doing. And
yeah.
no shade, by the way. The time you take and shows in that series, it's amazing.
I'm curious for all of you if we can end on just um, something that sticks with you about the project that you're here discussing. So, Brad, maybe for you, something about that conversation with Eric, one of the conversations you had, one of the many long conversations you had for this documentary, and maybe for season 4 of Love on the Spectrum, just a moment from it that sticks with you.
Oh, do you want me to start? Oh, damn. Moment that sticks with me. I don't know. I mean, that's a hard one. Obviously, the engagement was pretty special when Madison and Tyler got engaged. But for me, like, it's hard for me because I'm directing, I'm shooting second camera, I'm kind of keeping an eye on everyone else. So it's sort of, I sort of find my sort of feeling for the moments when I'm in the edit and I can actually experience them. But at the time, yeah, you still feel and you still know those moments are special, but there's just so much going on that it can be difficult. But that was pretty special. And the engagement party with everyone coming together, and despite the fact that it literally was the hardest shoot day of my life, just cameras everywhere trying to we didn't really do it the way you would do a multi-camera shoot. It was still just me trying to kind of run everything, and it was, yeah, a bad idea. But yeah, I think those were pretty special moments. I mean, things like I think what I when we film someone going on a day and things go really well and it's really interesting and really exciting, I mean, those are the days where I just feel like, okay, we've got something special. Logan and Haley's first date, coming home after that, I felt pretty good and was, feeling positive about the show.
Special moment. Well, you know, the I was already in the edit, in the middle of shooting across the entire series when we got this footage, that, of Sean in his last, days before the indictment. And that was definitely like a moment. I was like, wow. And it was sort of like, in making documentaries, you wait for those moments in your edit where like this is going to be really interesting to weave together, but like, oh my God, how am I going to like rip apart the edit to like make this work? So that was very special. But I think the most uh, special may not be the right word, but like the most reflective I was on the journey was at the end, um, after when interviewing the jurors, because that was the first time, we were in our cave making this story, and then to get those two jurors to come in and explain what was going on in the courtroom, um, and how they, that they gave this man the benefit of the doubt, really sort of put this whole series into perspective to me. And I think it's where I hope the conversation goes with the series, which is, yes, it's a story about Sean Combs, but at the end of the day, it's really a mirror and a reflection to us as people and as members of society and, worshiping idols and celebrity and what do we give people the benefit of the doubt just because they're famous. And so I think that's sort of the bigger takeaway. And maybe his story is a little bit of a cautionary tale. Well, it's still to be continued because he will be out soon. But that kind of became the most special thing to me about the series.
Um, I don't know if I don't know if it's a moment, but I think all the guests kind of provide for us who they leave behind is that they they help us bring death into our lives. And I think humans don't know they're alive. I mean, it's that idea that a fish in water is like that's us being alive. Like they're not aware of the water around them, and so I think the moments with, especially with Eric, because he was so young and his ability to bring death into his life so bravely, sort of, it certainly for me impacted a lot to be to have death be much more an active part of my life, which I hope that the show does that for everybody, and the courage of all the guests to be willing to do that, knowing they don't have to deal with the feeling of that afterwards, but we all sort of get to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Famous Last Words, Eric Dane, Sean Combs' The Reckoning, and Love on the Spectrum are all available on Netflix.